62 Viking longships sail through the Strait of Gibraltar into a sea they have never entered before. What waits for them is not empty water. It is the most sophisticated civilization in the Western world. The Umayyad Emirate of Cordoba stands at the peak of its power, its scholars, its armies, its navies unmatched in Europe. And yet, within days, its greatest city lies burning. For 2.5 centuries, Norse warriors and Arab rulers clash across Spain, North Africa, and Sicily. Sometimes the Vikings win, often they do not. But the final chapter, the one no one sees coming, is not a Viking victory at all. It is a Viking transformation. If you found this episode informative, consider subscribing for more historical stories. The morning of the 25th of September 844 begins like any other in Isprilia, the city the world now calls Seville. The Guadalquivir River runs wide and brown through the flat marshlands. Merchant boats move at the pace of the current. Then, emerging from the river mist, come the shapes no one expects. 54 long ships, low, fast, and packed with armed men, drive upstream without warning. These are the mages, as Arab chronicles name them, a term borrowed from Persian, meaning roughly fire worshippers. To the scholars of Cordoba, they are a people without God, without law, and apparently without fear. The Viking Age has been underway for over 60 years by the time that fleet appears. Since the raid on Lindisfarne Monastery in 793, Norse warriors have dismantled the coastlines of Britain, Ireland, and Francia with systematic brutality. They sail from Scandinavia in clinker-built longships, vessels so shallow in draft they can navigate rivers as easily as open sea. This single engineering advantage transforms every waterway on the continent into a road to plunder. By the 830s, Viking fleets are wintering on the Seine and the Loire, raiding inland year after year. By 844, they have pushed further south than any Norse force before them. The world they enter in the Iberian Peninsula is dazzling by the standards of 9th century Europe. The Umayyad Emirate of Cordoba, established in 756 by Abdel-Rahman I, is already the dominant power of the Western Mediterranean. Its capital, Cordoba, houses a library of 400,000 volumes, more books than exist in all of Northern Europe combined. Its streets are paved and lit at night. Its agricultural engineers have transformed the dry Iberian plateau into productive farmland through advanced irrigation systems. When the governor of Lisbon, Wabala ibn Hazm, writes urgently to Emir Abd al-Rahman II in Cordoba to report Viking ships on the river, the contrast between the two worlds could not be sharper. The Vikings occupy Lisbon for 13 days, raiding its outskirts and stripping whatever they can carry. Then they sail south, striking Cadiz, Medina Sidonia, and Algeciras in rapid succession. By the 25th of September, the fleet anchors at Isla Minor, a defensible island in the Guadalquivir marshes just south of Seville. Local Muslim forces march out on the 29th of September and are defeated. On the 1st of October or the 3rd of October, as some sources record, the Vikings storm the city walls. The great mosque of Seville survives their attempt to burn it, but little else does. For over a month, the raiders hold the city and plunder its suburbs. What makes this encounter historically remarkable is what happens next. In half a century of Viking raids across northern Europe, no king or emperor has managed to organize a fast, effective military response. Charlemagne's empire has fractured. English kingdoms have fallen. But Abdel-Rahman II does something different. The moment word reaches Cordoba, he summons governors from across the emirate. He calls even on Musa ibn Musa al-Qasi, the semi-independent lord of the north, a political rival, and Musa comes. The coalition army marched to Axaraf, the hill overlooking Seville, and establishes its headquarters. What follows is not a single decisive battle, but a grinding series of skirmishes through October into November. The Vikings hold the city, raid the countryside, and resist each attempt to dislodge them. Then, on the 11th or the 17th of November 844, The sources disagree on the precise date. The Muslim forces deliver a decisive blow at the plain of Taliata. The weapon that tips the balance is not swords or cavalry. It is fire, Greek fire. An incendiary liquid launched by catapult strikes the Viking longships at anchor. Between 500 and 1,000 Norse warriors die, according to Muslim chronicles. 30 ships burn. The survivors negotiate their release. The stolen goods and captives returned in exchange for safe passage down the river. They sail out of Spain, weakened, plundered in turn. But the story has barely begun, because the defeat at Seville does not end the Viking ambition for the south. It refines it. 15 years later, a fleet twice as large and twice as ambitious sets sail, and this time it goes far beyond Spain. The defeat at Taliata teaches the Vikings one lesson above all others. The Emirate of Cordoba fights back. In 859, 15 years after the burning fleet, two of the most formidable Norse commanders of the age assemble 62 ships on the Loire River in Francia. Their names are Björn Ironside and Hastein. Their plan is the largest and most geographically ambitious Viking expedition ever attempted. The sources that document this voyage include Frankish, Norman, Arab, Scandinavian, and Irish chronicles. Historian Elise Rosedal, in her foundational work on the Vikings, confirms that a winter camp is archaeologically attested in the Camargue near the Rhine Delta. Arab sources independently record a raid on the North African port of Nacre during the same period. The broad outline of what follows is well established, even where individual details remain disputed. Björn and Hastein sail south along the Atlantic coast of Iberia. Resistance in the Christian north of Spain forces them away from the coast, and they find the Emirate's defenses along the main river approaches hardened since 844. Abdel-Rahman II, who responded to the first raid by building a naval arsenal at Seville and strengthening the city walls, has prepared his coastline well. The scouts the Vikings send ahead are captured, and their ships are already full of treasure. A detail Arab sources record with grim satisfaction, noting that the infidels have clearly robbed others before arriving here. The fleet is turned away from the major river approaches and forced further south. At Algeciras, near the tip of Iberia, they burn the local mosque and pass through the Strait of Gibraltar. No Viking fleet has ever entered the Mediterranean. The sea stretches before them, its southern shore Muslim, its northern shore a patchwork of Frankish territories and small Italian principalities, its eastern reaches belonging to the Byzantine Empire. They turn south first. The North African coast of the Idrisid Emirate offers little organized resistance. The fleet lands near modern Melilla, at the port of Nacre, known then as one of the cultural centers of the Rif region. The Arab geographer Abdullah al-Bakri, drawing on earlier sources, records what happens with devastating brevity in his account. The Magus land, plunder the city, and enslave its inhabitants over 8 days. Among those taken captive are 2 daughters of a prominent local noble family, Amma al-Rahman and Kangla, daughters of Waqif ibn Mutassim ibn Skli. The Emir of Cordoba, Muhammad I, ransoms them. Their names survive in the historical record precisely because they are ransomed, a reminder that for every named captive, hundreds more vanish without trace. The Vikings also seize a number of sub-Saharan Africans at Nacre, men whom they describe in their own sources as Blamen, or blue men, probably enslaved people brought to North Africa by Arab traders. The Norse find them so remarkable that some are brought back to Ireland, where skeletal remains of sub-Saharan African individuals have been found in Viking Age graves, offering mute physical evidence of this forgotten intersection of worlds. From North Africa, the fleet curves back north along the Spanish Mediterranean coast, raids the Balearic Islands, strikes Narbonne, and winters on the island of Camargue at the mouth of the Rhine. In spring, they drive up the river valley. Nimes, Arles, and Valence all suffer. A Frankish force eventually defeats them in battle, and the fleet turns east toward Italy. There, at the Ligurian port of Luni, occurs one of the most celebrated episodes of the entire Viking age. Hastein sends word to the bishop of the city. Their leader is dying. He is converted to Christianity, and he begs the right to be buried within the consecrated city walls. The bishop agrees. The coffin is carried through the gates. Inside it, Hastein waits. What happens next leads directly to one of the largest bloodbaths of the expedition, and reveals that the Mediterranean, far from subduing these northern raiders, is drawing them deeper in. Hastein leaps from the coffin. His 50-man honor guard draws weapons from beneath their robes. The city gates open from inside. Luni falls within minutes. According to the Norman chronicler William of Jummages, writing around 1070 and drawing on earlier sources, Hastein had been told this small Ligurian port was the city of Rome. When he discovers his mistake, that he has sacked a modest harbor town rather than the eternal capital of the ancient world, the chronicler records that his disappointment turns to fury, and he orders the massacre of the city's male population. Whether or not that specific detail is accurate, the core of the Luni story, the deception, the false funeral, the sacking, appears across multiple independent medieval sources and is generally accepted by historians as reflecting a real event. The fleet then moves down the Tuscan coast, sacking Pisa and following the Arno upstream to take the hill town of Fiesole, above Florence. After this point, the Norse fleet disappears from the written record for approximately a year, which scholars believe represents a period of wintering in the eastern Mediterranean, possibly raiding Byzantine territories, though the evidence for this remains thin. What is clear from the Annals of St. Bertin, a Frankish chronicle written by contemporary witnesses, is that the fleet eventually returns westward laden with plunder and captives from across the Mediterranean basin. The return journey proves catastrophic. Approaching the Strait of Gibraltar on the homeward voyage, the fleet encounters the Andalusian navy, positioned and waiting. The coastal defenses Abd el-Rahman II built after 844 have evolved under his successor, Muhammad I, into a genuine naval power. Fire catapults, the same Greek fire that destroyed 30 ships at Talyada, strike the fleet again as it fights the strong current at the strait. 40 ships are lost to the storm and the Andalusian assault combined. 2 more are destroyed in a surprise attack near Medina Sidonia. Of the original 62 vessels that left the Loire 3 years earlier, only 20 return. And yet before that final gauntlet, the Vikings achieve one further remarkable feat. Somewhere in the mountain passes of northern Spain, on the return leg of their journey, they intercept and capture Garcia Iniguez, the king of Pamplona. The ransom demanded and paid, according to sources, is 70,000 gold dinars, literally a king's ransom, paid in the currency of the Muslim South. Over 2/3 of the men who sailed in 859 are dead by the time the fleet drops anchor back on the Loire. But Hastein and Björn are enormously wealthy. The raid is, by the brutal economics of Viking warfare, a success. It also changes the strategic picture permanently. The 859 to 862 expedition demonstrates that Viking forces can operate in the Mediterranean for years at a time. It establishes that the Arab world is not invulnerable, but it also establishes, beyond any doubt, that it is formidable. Muhammad I responds to the raids of the 860s by completing and expanding his father's coastal defenses. A sophisticated messenger network spreads information about Viking movements along the entire Iberian coast. Later Viking raids on the Iberian Peninsula, recorded in 966, are repelled far more effectively than the first. The Emirate adapts faster than almost any other polity facing Norse aggression. Meanwhile, to the north and east, another chapter of this story is quietly beginning. In the hills of Normandy, a territory carved out of Francia by Viking settlers just a generation earlier, the grandsons of Norse raiders are becoming something new. They are learning to ride horses as knights. They are converting sincerely and permanently to Christianity. They are looking south toward the glittering prize of the Mediterranean. And this time they are not coming as raiders. They are coming to stay. The stage is set for the most consequential Norse-Arab encounter of them all. Not a raid, but a conquest that will reshape the Mediterranean world for centuries. By the year 1000, the island of Sicily has been under Arab rule for nearly 2 centuries. The Aghlabid forces who invaded from North Africa in the early 9th century conquered it city by city, Palermo falling in 831, Syracuse holding out until 878. What they build in those 200 years is, by any contemporary measure, remarkable. Arab agronomists introduce citrus, sugar cane, cotton, and new irrigation techniques to the island. Palermo becomes one of the wealthiest and most populous cities in Europe. The traveler Ibn Hakel, visiting in the 970s, describes hundreds of mosques and a standard of urban life that astonishes him. But by 1060, the Muslim emirate of Sicily is fracturing. The last ruler of the native Caliphate dynasty died in 1053. The North African Zirid dynasty, nominally in control, is consumed by its own civil wars. The island is divided between 4 competing Muslim commanders, the Qayyids, who battle each other as fiercely as they defend against outsiders. One of them, Ibn al-Timna, the Qayyid of Catania and Syracuse, makes a decision that will end 2 centuries of Islamic rule in Sicily. Desperate to defeat his rival Ibn al-Hawaz, he crosses to Calabria in 1060 and invites the Normans to intervene. The Normans who answer his call are the descendants of the very Vikings who raided Seville in 844. 3 generations removed from Scandinavia, they are French in language and Christian in faith, but their appetite for conquest is entirely recognizable. Roger de Hauteville, the youngest and most energetic of the Hauteville brothers, crosses the Strait of Messina in May 1061 with an advance force. He lands overnight unseen and surprises the Arab garrison at dawn. By the time his brother Robert's larger force arrives that same day, Messina is abandoned. The chronicler Geoffrey of Malaterra, writing the definitive contemporary history of the conquest in his work De Rebus Gestis Rhizarei, records the subsequent 30 years' struggle with close attention to both Norman and Arab perspectives. At the Battle of Cherami in June 1063, Roger's force of approximately 136 knights faces a Muslim army that some sources estimate at 50,000 strong. The Normans win. Roger sends 4 camels laden with captured spoils to Pope Alexander II in Rome. The Pope, in return, grants Roger a papal banner and declares that all who assist in the conquest of Sicily will receive absolution. The war grinds on for 3 decades. Palermo falls in January 1072, when Robert and Roger take the city after a sustained siege. Roger becomes Count of Sicily, but the island's Muslim-majority interior resists for another 19 years. Syracuse falls in 1086 when Roger launches a night attack on the Arab fleet in the harbor, and the Emir Benevert drowns in his armor trying to escape. The final stronghold, Noto in the far southeast, surrenders in February 1091. 2 centuries of Arab Sicily end not with a single battle, but with a gradual, grinding 30-year campaign. What emerges from Norman rule is something that defies the clean narrative of conquest. Roger I rules a population that remains majority Muslim for decades after 1091. His son Roger II, crowned King of Sicily on Christmas Day 1130, is educated by Arab and Greek tutors. Arab administrators manage the royal finances. Arab craftsmen build the royal palaces. The Palatine Chapel in Palermo, a Norman-built church consecrated in 1140, displays Arabic inscriptions in its ceiling alongside Christian mosaics. It is, as historians including John Julius Norwich have observed, one of the most extraordinary cultural syntheses in medieval history. The story that begins with longships on the Guadalquivir in 844 ends not with the destruction of Arab civilization in the West, but with its absorption into the culture of the conquerors. 2.5 centuries of Norse-Arab conflict yields a paradox. The Vikings who could not break the Emirate of Cordoba in 844 produce. 3 generations later, the Normans who absorb Arab Sicily so completely that their own kingdom becomes Arabic in style. What this history tells us is something historians have long recognized. Civilizations at war absorb more from each other than civilizations at peace. The Arabic inscriptions on a Norman ceiling in Palermo are not an accident. They are the final ledger of every raid, every ransom, every captive, every merchant, all the violent and reluctant commerce between 2 worlds that could not ignore each other. History rarely ends where it begins. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history and learned something new, please like this video and subscribe to Unleash Facts. Your support helps us continue creating comprehensive historical documentaries that bring the past to life. Thank you for watching.